organized.
We're working to connect a region of over 600 cultural bridges between our lands.
Hello, I'm Alma Angeles. Welcome to ASEAN in Focus. We're coming to you live from Manila in Vietnam. Hello, Eliana.
Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, bringing you the news in the dynamic ASEAN region.
On today's headlines. A U.S. warship sailed through the South China Sea on Thursday, sparking a warning from China's military as tensions between the superpowers remain high.
Thailand will resume its quarantine-free travel scheme from February 1, officials said Thursday, after the program was suspended due to the fast-spreading Omicron COVID-19 variant.
The Department of Agriculture said it would import around 60,000 metric tons of small pelagic fish, such as galunggong, sardines, and mackerel, to plug projected fish supply shortfall in the first quarter of 2022.
Indonesia's parliament passed a law approving the relocation of its capital from slowly sinking Jakarta to a site 2,000 kilometers away on jungle-clad Borneo Island that will be named Nusantara.
First in our news, the Interagency Task Force for the Management of Emerging Infectious Diseases resolution on Thursday decided to hoist Alert Level 4 in 4 areas due to rising infections and crowded healthcare facilities. Acting Presidential Spokesperson Carlo Nograles said Kalinga, Ifugao, and Mountain Province in the Cordillera Administrative Region, as well as the province of Northern Samar, will be placed under Alert Level 4. Under the IATF guidelines, an Alert Level 4 is imposed in an area where cases counts are higher and or increasing, with total bed utilization rate and intensive care utilization rate is at high utilization. Now, this is the second highest classification next to Alert Level 5, which is equivalent to the imposition of a total lockdown in an area. Nograles also said the IATF also decided to place the following areas under Alert Level 3, which is Apayao, Puerto Princesa City, Masbate, Siquijor, Zamboanga del Norte, Zamboanga, Sibugay, Lanao del Norte, Davao de Oro, Davao Oriental, North Cotabato, Sarangani, Sultan Kudarat, Surigao del Norte, Maguindanao, and Basilan. An area is placed under Alert Level 3 if its COVID-19 cases are high and or increasing, with total bed utilization rate and ICU utilization rate at increased use. Now, he said these alert levels shall take effect beginning January 21 today until January 31.
President Rodrigo Duterte on Monday reminded those who refuse to get vaccinated against COVID-19 that their individual rights must subserve public good. He acknowledged criticism over his directive to village officials to restrict movements of unvaccinated persons, but explained that their individual rights cannot go above the interest of the community.
Ang hinahabol natin dyan is the greatest good for the greatest number. Yan talaga ang, that's a dictum that must be remembered when constitutional provisions are being put into issue. Kagaya ng alamin ng barangay captain kung sino yung may walang bakuna. It does not, even if it is really a violation, at this time when there is a public protection of the public, of the many, masasakripisyo talaga yung the right to will be not really sacrificed, but must be below always. It cannot go higher than the public good. The greatest number would always prevail.
Duterte earlier said he is ready to answer complaints that would be filed against him for ordering village officials in the country to restrict the movement of unvaccinated people. Several local governments, particularly in Metro Manila, are currently imposing restrictions on unvaccinated individuals. While there may be justifiable reasons for imposing restrictions on individuals who have not been vaccinated, the Commission on Human Rights said they must not be denied access to essential government services.
Meanwhile, the Department of Agriculture said it would import around 60,000 metric tons of small pelagic fish such as galunggong, sardines, and mackerel to plug the projected fish supply shortfall in the first quarter of this year. Agriculture Secretary William Dar also said that Typhoon Odette heavily impacted the fishing sector. Again, let's listen in.
And PARMC said we have more than enough supply. Maybe that's their thinking. But accordingly, based from the data of the Bureau of Fisheries and Aquatic Resources, we have the potential deficit this quarter of about 119,000 metric tons. So that's one to consider. Number two to consider, that there is Typhoon Odette. So we cannot just say that the fishing sector continues to be normal. They are the number one in the subsector of agriculture, badly hit during the Typhoon Odette. So the capacity of our fishers to catch will be in question. You have to enhance their capacities. Number three, you continue to see inflation, high prices in most of the market for fish. Pangalawa yan sa support na nagbibigay ng higher contributions sa food inflation. So pangapat, there are these logistics problems, of course, that we need to properly manage. Ako, by the end of the day, being the Secretary of Agriculture, having considered everything, NPARMC is a body that has the recommendatory responsibility. So let me use that word, recommendatory responsibility. But at the end of the day, we take responsibility in terms of the ensuring food security, in this case, fish supply of small pelagic fishes. So I just signed yesterday a certificate of the need to import for this first quarter the amount of 60,000 metric tons of small pelagic fishes to be imported for this quarter of the year.
Typhoon Odette had hit many provinces in the Visayas and Mindanao, including provinces known to contribute to the country's fish supplies. The Department of Agriculture said that there could be a spike in fisheries and agriculture input costs with the rise of global prices of petroleum and fish feed. The DA also said it has allotted 50 million pesos of its 1 billion quick response fund post-Odette for the distribution of marine diesel gasoline engines, the fabrication of durable fiberglass fishing boats, and the distribution of fisheries relief goods such as canned tuna, sardines, and frozen fish.
UN resident and humanitarian coordinator for the Philippines, Gustavo Gonzalez, said Typhoon Rai was the world's second deadliest disaster of 2021, adding that the magnitude of the damage is very close to the destruction caused, as you remember, by Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Speaking to reporters via a video link on January 20, Gonzalez said that since his last briefing on December 21, the numbers of people affected has increased 3 times. Let's take a look.
And one thing is very clear today in the Philippines, that after 1 month since the first landfall of a super typhoon Rai, we realized that we have badly underestimated the scale of devastation. So we can say today, after 1 month, that the Typhoon Rai was the world's second deadliest disaster of 2021, after, of course, the Haiti earthquake, and the magnitude of its damage is very close to the destruction caused, as you remember, by Typhoon Haiyan in 2013. Since December 21st, when I last briefed you, the numbers of people affected has increased 3 times. We are reaching today the 9 million of people affected by the super typhoon. In terms of the damaged or destroyed houses, the number have increased 7 times, from 200,000 to over 1.5 million, which is almost 1/3 more than at the time of the Typhoon Haiyan. And in terms of casualties, we have almost doubled the numbers of people being killed as a result of the typhoon, from 177 at the time of the first assessment, and now we confirm 405 people. We are talking about a crisis within a crisis. So, as you know, the Philippines is confronted today to an exponential increase of the numbers of COVID-19 cases. We are talking about 3.2 million, the total, and presently around 300 cases of COVID-19. The current ratio of COVID-19 test positivity is over 46%, and many humanitarian responders, humanitarian teams, members of my team, myself, we are testing positive, which is restricting staff movement, and of course is affecting our operations at the field level. My top concerns as a humanitarian coordinators are related to immediate support in terms of shelter, supporting families to repair and rebuild their homes. For many of them, this will start by helping to clear a vast amount of debris from the storm. The importance of meeting people's protection needs and address protection risks. As you know, displaced people, women, children who are hit by the crisis are more vulnerable to sexual exploitation, abuse, gender-based violence.
Thank you very much, Gustavo, on behalf.
In other news, an Indonesian court sentenced an Al-Qaeda-linked Islamist militant to 15 years in prison on Wednesday for his role in the 2002 bombings that killed more than 200 people on the resort island of Bali. The blast, which came just over a year after the 9/11 attacks of the United States, ripped through 2 bars packed with foreign tourists and remained the deadliest militant assault in Indonesia's history. Zulkarnaen, a high-ranking member of the Jemaah Islamiyah militant group, was on trial for the Bali bombings as well as several other attacks carried out by a special unit under his command. The 58-year-old, whose real name was listed with the court as Arif Sunarso, had been on Indonesia's most wanted list since the bombings, having evaded authorities for nearly 2 decades until his arrest in December 2020. Indonesian prosecutors had said Zulkarnaen set up the special JI cell and described him as a key asset for the group because of his experience as a trainer at militant camps in Afghanistan and the Philippines. During the trial, Zulkarnaen denied involvement in the Bali bombings, but he admitted they were carried out by his team. He told the court that Jemaah Islamiyah operatives did not tell him about the attack in advance and that he was not involved in specific planning, but the judges were not convinced. The court also flagged other attacks by Zulkarnaen's cell during the sentencing, including a 2000 attack on the Philippine embassy and a series of church bombings.
Cambodian opposition leader Kem Sokha called Wednesday for treason charges against him to be dropped as his trial resumed after 2 years of delays due to the COVID-19 pandemic. The case against the 68-year-old has been widely condemned as politically motivated and has dragged on for years. He stands accused of conspiring with foreign entities to overthrow the government of strongman ruler Hun Sen, according to court documents, charges he vehemently denies. Let's take a look.
I hope that they will drop my case today for Cambodia, continue for the national reconciliation. ខ្ញុំសង្ឃឹមថាថ្ងៃនេះតុលាការនឹងសម្រេចទម្លាក់ចោលការចោទប្រកាន់មកលើរូបខ្ញុំដើម្បីកម្ពុជាយើងបោះជំហានទៅរកការផ្សះផ្សារូបរងជាតិហើយយើងមានសាមគ្គីជាតិដើម្បីអភិវឌ្ឍប្រទេសជាតិយើងទាំងអស់គ្នាតទៅទៀតសូមអរគុណទាំងរងចាំរបស់ខ្ញុំយូរហើយដើម្បីឲ្យសកម្មភាពដំណើរការឡើងវិញហើយដើម្បីបញ្ចប់នៅកិច្ចការទាំងអស់នេះខ្ញុំប្រសិនជាជនជាប់ចោទគាត់ទទួលស្គាល់ការពិតទទួលស្គាល់កំហុសនិងទទួលស្គាល់នៅទង្វើដែលគាត់បានធ្វើខុសនឹងច្បាប់ហើយគាត់បានសារភាពទទួលយកនៅទោសកំហុសទាំងអស់នោះអាហ្នឹងក៏វាឆាប់ចប់ដែរ
Sokha's trial began in January 2020, more than 2 years after his arrest. But hearings were postponed in March that year following coronavirus restrictions. If convicted, he faces up to 30 years in jail. Sokha co-founded the now-dissolved Cambodia National Rescue Party, once considered the main challenger to the ruling Cambodian People's Party led by Hun Sen, who has ruled the country with an iron fist for 37 years. Sokha was arrested in 2017 and his party dissolved ahead of widely criticized elections the following year, leaving the CPP to canter to victory virtually unopposed. The opposition leader was first detained in a remote prison and then placed under house arrest before his bail conditions were relaxed in November 2019. More than 24 activists jailed over charges against Hun Sen's government were released late last year after court reduced their sentences or granted them bail. HRW said at least 60 political prisoners remained in custody as their mass trial resumed in December.
A U.S. warship sailed through the South China Sea on Thursday, sparking a warning from China's military as tensions between the superpowers remain high. The American Navy said the USS Benfold asserted navigational rights and freedoms in the vicinity of the Paracel Islands, consistent with international law. The Southern Theater Command of the People's Liberation Army said the U.S. ship had illegally entered what Beijing regards as its waters. Thursday's passage by the USS Benfold was the first declared FUN-UP of the year. It came a week after the U.S. laid out its most detailed case yet against Beijing's unlawful claims in the South China Sea, rejecting both the geographic and historical justifications. In a 47-page research paper, the State Department's Bureau of Oceans and International Environmental and Scientific Affairs said China had no basis under international law for claims that have put Beijing on a collision course with the Philippines, Vietnam, and other Southeast Asian nations. China has rejected the report.
The acquisition of the Indian-made brahmos medium-range ramjet supersonic BrahMos cruise missiles will greatly enhance the Philippine Navy's capabilities to defend the country's vast maritime borders. It will increase the capability of the AFP, or Armed Forces of the Philippines, particularly the Philippine Navy, to defend the country's extensive maritime borders, PN spokesperson Commander Benjo Negranza said in a message to Philippine news agency on Monday night when asked how the acquisition of the BrahMos will affect the country's deterrent capabilities. Negranza added the BrahMos will also complement the efforts of PN surface ships in patrolling Philippines waters. aside from beefing up the Philippine Marine Corps or PMC firepower. Earlier, Department of National Defense Secretary Delphine Lorenzana said the deliveries of the brahmos for the PN shore-based anti-ship missile system acquisition project is expected to start within a year. The brahmos project is worth $374,162,800 USD, or around 19 billion pesos.
In other news, Norwegian cell phone operator Telenor said it is also selling its stake in a digital payment service in Myanmar following the military coup in the Asian country. Telenor, which has already announced the sale of its Burmese telecom subsidiary, will sell its 51% stake in Digital Money Myanmar Limited, or Wave Money, for $53 million or 46 million euros, according to the company in a statement. The service allows people to make financial transactions from their mobile phones. Yoma MFS Holdings, a subsidiary of Yoma Strategic, which is listed on the Singapore Stock Exchange and already owns 44% of Wave Money, will buy the stake and thereby take control of the company. Telenor's announced exit from Myanmar followed last year's military coup that ousted civilian leader Aung San Suu Kyi and her government, with the phone operator saying it had become increasingly difficult to operate in the country. In September, Telenor accused the military junta of demanding installation of equipment in order to intercept telecommunications, a demand the operator said it had refused.
Two Myanmar football teams have pulled out of Asian tournaments for the second year running, officials said Wednesday, as the country faces ongoing turmoil after last year's coup. The Asian Football Confederation, or AFC, said Shan United FC withdrew from the AFC Champions League, while Hantharwadi United FC pulled out of the AFC Cup. The Champions League is Asia's top club tournament, while the AFC Cup is a second-tier club competition. Hantharwadi had been drawn in Group 1 for the AFC Cup, while Shan United were to take part in the preliminary stage of the Champions League. No reason was given for the withdrawals, and there was no announcement on which teams would replace them. Both teams pulled out of the same tournaments last year. Myanmar has been gripped by violence since the coup in February last year ousted Aung San Suu Kyi's civilian government. More than 1,400 civilians have since been killed in a military crackdown on dissent, according to a local monitoring group.
And the news continues here on ASEAN in Focus. Eliana and I will be back right after this.
Sabi sa science, in every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction.
Ano daw?
May sagot na malinaw na mali.
Lahat ng classmate ko, sa akin nangungopia.
10 taon ako nag-high school, sir.
May mga sagot na para sa sarili mo ring tanong.
Topic. Tabla lang, ha?
May sagot na mahirap tanggapin.
Don't talk when your mouth is full. May space pa naman po.
Excitement ang reaction. Dahil sa ice ba tayo dyan? Tignan na maigi kung sino yan.
Pero taga rito yan. Taga dito yan.
Funniest Nakaball Videos.
Dodong!
Hindi ko kaya yan.
Dodong! Kumalma ka! Ngayon lang po kasi talaga kami nakarinig ng buffet lifeguard.
Kami lang ang resort na merong ganyang title.
Nasaan ako? Lumubog ba yung barko natin?
Hindi tayo na stranded, hindi tayo inanod.
Lumubog yung barkong sinasakyan natin.
Welcome back. Thailand will resume its quarantine-free travel scheme from February 1st, according to officials, after the program was suspended due to the fast-spreading Omicron COVID-19 variant. Pandemic travel curbs have hammered the kingdom's tourism-dominated economy, sending visitors' numbers dwindling to a trickle. Now, spokesman for the country's COVID task force, Tawisin Visanoyetin, told reporters that fully vaccinated travelers will now be able to enter under the test and go scheme as long as they take COVID tests on the first and fifth days after arriving. Visitors will have to isolate at a hotel while waiting for their test results and will be required to download a tracking app to ensure they comply with the rules. The program was suspended late last month over fears about Omicron, but with deaths and hospitalizations not spiking, Tawisin said it could resume, though the authorities will keep it under review. Tawisin also said in case there are more infections or the situation changes, there will be a reassessment for inbound travelers and adjust toward the Sandbox scheme. Under the Sandbox program launched last year, as a first step towards resuming tourism, fully jabbed visitors spend 7 nights in certain designated locations, such as the resort island of Phuket, before being allowed to travel on to the rest of Thailand. In a further relaxation of COVID restrictions, restaurants will be allowed to serve alcohol until 11 p.m., easing the current 9 p.m. cutoff. The Tourism Ministry estimates that some 5 million foreign visitors will come to Thailand this year, down from nearly 40 million in the year before the pandemic.
The U.S. Embassy in Manila announced Wednesday that travelers from the Philippines to the U.S. are required to present a negative viral test from COVID-19 taken within 24 hours before their flight, and because of that, they should ensure with their testing provider first if they can commit to delivering to release the results hours before their flight. In an advisory, the embassy said this newest time frame for the test requirements will be imposed on travelers 2 years and older, regardless of vaccination status and citizenship. The embassy said PCR or antigen tests are available for U.S. citizens in the Philippines, but may be limited and test results may be delayed because of an increase in demand for COVID-19 testing. The embassy said in a separate advisory, these delays, which have occurred in other countries during spikes in COVID-19 infections, could continue for the next 2 to 4 weeks. To prevent further delays in testing, Americans are likewise advised to review the requirements of their testing provider, including identification cards and payment options. They are also directed to check if their testing provider of choice is accredited by the Philippine Department of Health. If travelers to the U.S. have just recovered from COVID-19 within 90 days prior to their flight, they may be exempted from the 24-hour viral test. Instead, they will be required to provide documentation from a licensed healthcare provider that they have recovered from coronavirus and the positive COVID-19 viral test result on a sample taken no more than 90 days before the flight's departure from the Philippines. The U.S. Center for Disease Control and Prevention had earlier required all foreigners, except U.S. lawful permanent residents or holders of immigrant visa, coming to the U.S. to be fully vaccinated.
In Vietnam, Vietjet Air announced its plan to reopen the air route connecting to Ho Chi Minh City with Thailand's Bangkok from today. Now, according to its government website, it will operate 2 round-trip flights per week on every Friday and Saturday between Ho Chi Minh City-based Tan Son Nhat International Airport and Suvar Nabumi in Bangkok. Vietjet has also operated many routes connecting Bangkok with other tourism and economic centers of Thailand, such as Chiang Mai, Chiang Rai, Phuket, Krabi, Hat Yai, Nakhon Si, Tamarat, Surat Thani, Udon Thani, Konkai, and Ubon Ratchathani, along with other regional routes. Earlier on January 1st, Vietjet resumed a series of international routes connecting Hanoi, Ho Chi Minh City with Tokyo, Taipei, Seoul, and Singapore, with 1 round trip per week each since early January this year. In the next phase, it will reopen its entire international flights and look to open new routes to India and Russia and other locations. To ensure good flight experiences, passengers are advised to follow localities' regulations on disease prevention and control and immigration regulations of destination countries, including vaccine passports, negative PCR tests, quarantine, and accommodation. Following the government's approval of a 2-week pilot program to resume flights to 9 destinations on January 1st, the Civil Aviation Authority of Vietnam has given domestic carriers flying slots to 8 destinations, namely Bangkok, San Francisco, U.S., Seoul, Singapore, Chinese Taipei, Tokyo, Phnom Penh or Phnom Penh, and Vientiane in Laos.
The newly renovated Manila Zoo on Wednesday formally opened to the public, including the unvaxxed visitors, as it would also serve as additional coronavirus disease 2019 or COVID-19 vaccination site of the city. During the unveiling of the newest COVID-19 vaccination site, Manila Mayor Francisco Isko Moreno Dumagoso clarified that even those who have yet to get their COVID-19 vaccines may visit the zoo. Let's listen in.
Paano po makapunta sa Manila Zoo? Ito po ay libre, no? Paano po makapunta sa Manila Zoo? Kayo po ay kumuha lang ng free ticket registration sa www.manilazoo.ph. From there, bibigyan na kayo, enroll nyo ang sarili nyo, enroll nyo ang anak nyo, ang apo ninyo. Ayan, pakikita nyo po yan, kiklik nyo lang yan, tapos magre-register na kayo. Pag na-register nyo na sarili nyo, pwede ka pa kayo mag-add family, no? Add lang ng add, no? So, yun lamang po, ganun lamang po kasimple. Tapos, ite-text kayo at may bibigyan ng link. Pag-click nyo doon, lalabas na yung QR code nyo. Yun ang po ipipresent ninyo. Ayan, add family. Yan. Yan, isa pa. O, yun. Ganyan po lang yan. Ganyan lang po kasimple yan. So, you can go, the whole family. Meron po tayong kakayanan tumanggap ng bisita o mamamasyal o magpapabakuna sa Manila Zoo, 1,000 tao. Araw-araw. At bukas po ang ating registration. Kagabi ang reported sa akin 6,300. Ewan ko ngayon kung ilan na ang pre-registered or nakakuha ng slot, no? Or slots sa ating Manila Zoo entry, no? So bukas po yan hanggang January 31. Tapos after that, titingnan natin kung kaya pa natin palakihin yung numero. Pero titingnan natin kung bumubuti yung ating sitwasyon sa coronavirus na nagaganap na surge, no? At sana nga magtuloy-tuloy ng pababa. Ito po ay bukas ang alas 8 ng umaga hanggang alas 8 ng gabi. Kapag magaang na ang buhay, no? Aabot tayo hanggang alas 10 ng gabi. Kasi napakaganda po magpunta sa gabi. Malamig, maaliwalas. Tapos makapamasyal kayo mga pamilya. Lalo na yung mga lolo't lola ko. Mga senior citizen. Yan, ako hihingaling kayong kakalakad. Marami kayong pasyalan sa bagong Manila Zoo. At sa mga bata, I'm happy for you. At the same time, pwede tayo magbakuna. Yan po. Ang total is 533 doses. Ang naibakuna kanina, nakapamasyal na sila, nabakunahan pa sila.
As we heard there, the minors may avail of primary doses and the elderly their booster shots. Mayor Isko said that those who will go to the Manila Zoo may opt to have their vaccine first before going around the zoo or may do so while waiting for their turn. Unlike in other sites, Manila Zoo will not entertain walk-ins. Registration must be made at manilazoo.ph for free entrance and at manilacovid19vaccine.ph to get vaccinated. Bringing in of food and water is allowed as there are no food stalls yet, but visitors must be responsible for waste disposal.
Generic drug manufacturers will make a more affordable version of Merck's anti-COVID pill for 105 of the world's poorer nations in deals announced Thursday by a UN-backed organization. The Global Medicines Patent Pool signed agreements with 27 manufacturers to produce the oral antiviral medicine Molnupiravir for supply in low and middle income countries. Merck granted a license to the MPP in an agreement announced in October. The MPP in turn issued sub-licenses to the generic drugs makers in agreements announced on Thursday. The sub-licenses allow manufacturers to produce the raw ingredients for Molnupiravir and or the finished drug itself. The companies involved are spread across Bangladesh, China, Egypt, Jordan, India, Indonesia, Kenya, Pakistan, South Africa, South Korea, and Vietnam. The 105 countries covered include some of the world's most heavily populated nations like India, Indonesia, Pakistan, Nigeria, Bangladesh, Ethiopia, and the Philippines, plus Egypt. Merck's pill is taken within 5 days of symptom onset and was shown in a trial of 1,400 participants to reduce COVID hospitalizations and deaths by 30% among at-risk people.
ASEAN in Focus will be back after a short break.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. May lalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
ASEAN in Focus, markets fell in Asian trade Friday following another wave of losses in Wall Street as traders returned their focus to the Federal Reserve's plans to ramp up interest rates while oil prices sank from their 7-year highs. Angst about the bank's determination to fight surging inflation by removing its ultra-loose monetary policy is dealing a severe blow to the rally in global markets that has run virtually uninterrupted for nearly 2 years, leaving most markets in the red at the start of 2022. Officials have already started tapering the massive bond buying stimulus put in place at the start of the stimulus, and is widely expected they will then start lifting borrowing costs from March, though by how much is a matter of speculation. The FED has also said it will begin offloading the bonds it already has on its books, which have been key in helping keep rates low, though it is not clear how quickly it will do that. Markets are now keenly awaiting the FED's board meeting next week, hoping it will provide a clear idea about its timetable for policy normalization. But with key officials now in a blackout period ahead of the gathering, there's little information for investors to work with, fueling uncertainty and volatility. Wall Street's three main indexes closed deep in negative territory again, having spent much of the day well up, with tech firms again the big losers, owing to their susceptibility to higher rates. Adding to the selling was data showing a pickup in U.S. jobless claims and a far weaker than expected reading on a key manufacturing index, which all suggest that while the Omicron COVID variant is less severe than feared, it is still causing concern. Traders are also keeping a nervous eye on Ukraine, where Russia's troop buildup is fanning concerns Moscow is planning an invasion. And having enjoyed a healthy run up Thursday on the back of further easing measures by China, Asian equities followed suit. Tokyo lost more than 1%, along with Sydney. Hong Kong retreated the day after more than 3% hike, while Shanghai, Seoul, Singapore, Wellington, Taipei, Manila, and Jakarta were also off.
In other news, Thailand has detected African swine fever in a pork sample on Tuesday, and authorities say a drop in swine production and a rise in the demand for pork are now key factors for higher prices. Take a look.
เสาร์อาทิตย์ได้ 8,000 ครับ ตอนนี้ 1,000-2,000 ยังไม่แทบไม่ได้เลย
เมื่อก่อนราคา100 กว่า ตอนนี้ขึ้น 200 กว่าเลยครับขึ้นเยอะมากเลยครับ ลูกค้านี่หมดเลย
กรณีอย่างเนี้ยที่หมูย่อยคือฟาร์มเล็กๆเลิกไปเลยเจ๊งไปเลยขาดทุนปิดตอนนี้เหลือแต่ฟาร์มใหญ่ๆฟาร์มที่เลี้ยงหลายๆหมื่นตัวเนี่ยอันนี้ก็ไม่ซื้อแล้ว หากินพวกปลาพวกไข่เขามันแพงมากมันก็ไม่ไหว
An epidemic outbreak in pigs last year has also blamed for the decline in swine production. The rising cost of preventing epidemics and the cost of animal feed caused many small farmers to shut down their businesses. Meanwhile, according to Tiger.com, Thailand's pork price crisis is causing an increased demand for chicken, leading poultry and egg prices to surge. The Ministry of Commerce has now added chickens and chicken meat to their price control list. The ministry now mandates that chicken raisers with over 100,000 chickens and slaughterhouses with the capacity for over 4,000 chickens a day disclose their quantity, stocks, and sales costs each month. The Central Committee on Prices of Goods and Services now requires all 55 domestic feed meal factories to list their sales costs, production volume, and stocks, as well as obtain approval from the International Trade Department, or ITD, before raising their products' prices.
The COVID-19 crisis is continuing to hit jobs hard around the world, the United Nations said Monday, warning it could take years for employment levels to reach pre-pandemic levels. In a new study, the UN's International Labour Organization revised its previous forecast that the global employment market will make a nearly full recovery from the virus this year, blaming the impacts of COVID variants like Delta and Omicron and uncertainty around how the pandemic will evolve. It now projects a significant deficit in working hours in 2022 compared to before COVID-19 emerged.
The main finding of our report is that the labour market recovery from the COVID-19 crisis is incomplete, it is fragile and it's uneven. So we expect in 2022 that the number of hours actually worked in the global economy will still be considerably below pre-pandemic level. And that represents effectively the loss of 52 million full-time job equivalents. So we're not even back to the starting point. The rich world, Europe and North America, is getting back to pre-pandemic levels more quickly. Some regions are doing less well. And the uncertainty comes from the fact that we are facing inflationary pressures, supply chain blockages, which means, well, things might continue to improve, but they could also go quite badly wrong as well. What we need to see is a genuine common international effort to pull the world forward from this pandemic. If each country goes its own way, I fear that the great divergence is only going to get worse rather than better. And that's really important in a world which is already suffering, I think, the stresses and strains of increased inequalities.
Writer cautioned the impact could last well after the pandemic ends. Monday's report predicted that global working hours could be 2% below the numbers seen in 2019, leaving the world short of the equivalent of some 52 million jobs.
Meanwhile, the Philippines' unmilled rice output last year breached the 20 million metric ton mark, making it the highest volume on record, despite the over 2.5 billion peso damage caused by Typhoon Odette to the rice industry. That according to Agriculture Secretary William Dar. Take a look.
In rice production, in spite of Typhoon Odette, in 2021, that's last year, we will get a new record harvest, surpassing 2020 record harvest of 19.4 million metric tons. So we are seeing a breach of 20 million metric tons. This will now be a new record harvest in rice production in the country. Kung sana wala lang itong African swine fever, ay ang ganda sana yung paglaguna ng sektor ng agrikultura. So very impressive yung growth ng rice. So we have enough rice.
The DA rolled out numerous measures to boost domestic rice production last year, which it organized under the so-called Philippine Integrated Rice Program, or PIRP. The Philippine Statistics Authority earlier reported that the country's rice self-sufficiency ratio in 2020 improved to 85% from 79.8% in 2019 on the back of the record high harvest.
And here's MJ Racario with an exclusive interview with one of the Basco brothers and their film, The Fabulous Filipino Brothers. Let's take a look.
Who are the Basco brothers? Filipino Americans who paved the way in Hollywood, currently on tour promoting their new film, The Fabulous Filipino Brothers. Take a look.
Is it important to be seen, especially the mainstream America, particularly the Filipino audience? Why is it important to see this film?
It's very important to see this film just because, it's a good film, and I hope that you enjoy it and laugh, and maybe you can see a little bit of yourself and your family in the film. And also to just stand and recognize that our stories matter. Our people matter, representation does matter, and it's just a celebration of the community and family and Filipino family. So I hope everyone out there, especially the Filipino community, get to go out and see the movie.
Absolutely.
Yes, we have to be the historians of our own narratives. You know, no one else is doing it. We got to do it for ourselves. So this is just one film, and because it's just one film, and we want to see more films. So why you got to come out and see this film is so that there are more films, that we can keep making the films, because that's the data that the industry is looking at, right? So we got traffic going to see this film, then that gives way for more films to be seen, so that when y'all out there are making a film, the industry knows at large that, hey, there's a demand for this, and there is a demand for our stories. So we have a saying in around these parts: you shine, I shine. So coming out and supporting. Of course, there's going to be more content, more films coming from the Filipino community, from the Asian community. We got to go out and support film cinema so that there's more of it.
Absolutely. Dion, what can you say about it?
Yeah, well, some of the numbers like that we have just our few screenings, because we've been playing at Regal Cinemas doing our screenings. We're actually like either 1 or 2 for that day of ticket sales. So if we continue to do this, Hollywood will notice that there is a market for our type of content. So, and then that hopefully other filmmakers will see that too and say, I got a shot. And let me tell my story, So.
That's well said.
You ready?
This is a story about 4 brothers. It's a love story, kinda. It's their quest to get it, keep it, and maintain it.
What's up, man? How you been? Good, man. How's the brothers? I'm in the wedding. It's not that big a deal. It's just a little party.
It's a wedding. How many people are we talking?
Uncle Jake, Uncle Dom, Uncle Boy.
And their wives.
And kids. Then you got Auntie Dulce, Auntie Pinky, Auntie Barbara.
And their husbands.
And kids.
Well, then, damn, that's like over 100 people already.
That's a lot of people. We're tribal. We're jungle Asian.
These fabulous Filipino brothers know each other better than anyone else, but they couldn't be more different.
How's it going?
I'm not like you guys. I don't have your heart or Deo's strength. What's that I have again?
Money.
Anybody going to the Phil Am dance tonight?
Can't make it. I got a date.
Oh, a date?
Did he say he has a date? I think he has a date.
You boy.
Until next time, I'm Ricardo here. Tune in to Eagle News. We live in interesting times.
Thank you, MJ. And thank you, Eliana, for keeping me company today here on ASEAN in Focus. You have a great, safe weekend.
Thank you, Alma, and I would just like to greet my dad a happy birthday. I love you po. And that's the latest news in the ASEAN region. Thank you for joining us here in ASEAN in Focus. I'm Eliana Faith Sebastian from EBC Vietnam Bureau, and we live in interesting times.
From ASEAN in Focus and its bureaus, happy birthday po, Daddy. Thank you very much. I'm Alma Angeles. We'll see you back next week. Stay in the news because we live in interesting times. Bye.